All right, so good evening and welcome to Off the Court with me, Wenton Mavore, a basketball show specifically dedicated to give you nothing but the base, not only in news happening within the circles and world of basketball, both locally and international, but we also get to discuss in-depth analysis of what is happening within the game, again, both local and international. But most importantly, we discuss developmental aspects and fundamentals that can help to grow the game of basketball on the African continent and in Zambia specifically. Now, tonight is a special night because we will not only be discussing basketball only, but we'll be looking at basketball from a CDF perspective. Now, those of you that are joining me and may not know exactly what CDF is, it is the Constituency Development Fund that the Zambian government enshrined in the 2020. In fact, let me just say in the budget, from the time that the United Party for National Development assumed power, and I beg your pardon, this is not a political show, so do not take it as such, but just allow me, for those that may not be familiar with this. So when the UPND assumed power, they did increase the Constituency Development Fund. And in this year's budget, we are sitting at over slightly 30 million kwacha per constituency, funds that are specifically meant for development. And last year we were at somewhere 28. So this fund has been improving. And this year we'll be looking at how sports development can be achieved through this particular fund. And joining me to be able to converse on this particular topic and others, first of all, I'll start with the gentleman that is here. And this is no stranger to the game. For those of you that are basketball fans in this country, obviously we are talking about, in fact, many of you know him as Tony. I don't know if you're able to hear me, Tony. Are you able to hear me? Tony, are you able to hear me? Okay, so I think Tony is yet to fix his audio. Just kindly try to increase maybe the volume, Tony. Okay, your microphone is muted. Just unmute it. Just kindly unmute your microphone, Tony. Okay, so Tony's microphone is currently still muted, but let me try to write him a message so that we can see how we can fix that. Okay. Another guest, ladies and gentlemen, that will be with me this evening is a legend within the game of basketball, a man that deserves no introduction as well. He's been around the game for the longest of time. And when I say the longest of time, I do mean the longest of time. He has been in the game for as long as some of you were not born. I believe by the time I was born, probably, he wasn't playing. No. But anyway, I'll take my chances on that. But this is no other than Mr. Oduka this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. You are welcome for the very first time on Off the Court Basketball Show. And I was just, playing around with the people that are watching us right now, that you've been in the game so long that some of them were not even born, with an exception of me, of course.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it says that, are you saying that I'm as old as a dinosaur?
No. We came up with a very diplomatic term for people like yourselves, Uncle Mwembe there, and the rest of that Scads crew that we know, those old ballies, we came up with a very, very good term. We don't want to call you dinosaurs, but you are our respectable, living ancestors. We're so privileged that the ancestors are walking among us. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So Tony is joining us. Tony, are you able to hear me now?
Loud and clear. This is much better.
Perfect. Okay, so we are good to go. And as I indicated in my opening statement, tonight we'll be looking at, obviously, the development of basketball. And this time around, we want to expand our horizon by not only sticking, to just on-court activities, as the show suggests, off the court. We also look at areas that we can explore to be able to see the development of the game. And our perspective this evening, of course, will be the Constituency Development Fund. But beyond that, we will be discussing some of the issues that surround the game of basketball. Hence, we have Mr. Mulemwa Balamani here, commonly known as Tony. So for the sake of those that know him as Tony, I'll be calling you Tony on this particular forum this evening. But okay, so Otema, let me start with you first of all. This evening, obviously, we want to, as indicated, expand our horizon when we talk about the issue of the game of basketball. There's so much that we've tackled on this platform, but we also just want to expand our horizon. And one area of interest that we want to look at is the Constituency Development Fund. And we've heard so many opportunities that this particular policy has for this country, and sport is not exclusive. So we want to first of all understand, and maybe from this, allow me to say that there's been a lot of talk about, how can we improve the game from a monetary perspective? How can we do this? How can we improve infrastructure? How can we do all these things? And there is the Constituency Development Fund. So just help us understand, how can the constituency, or how can clubs benefit from the Constituency Development Fund?
Thank you very much. Let me first take this opportunity to thank you for putting up this very important platform for us to discuss the development of sport we love so much. Like you rightly put it, basketball is a sport that I've been associated with for a very long time, over close to 40 plus years. But let me get right to the issue. The Constituency Development Fund is a fund that is supported by the government, and obviously over the time it was introduced, and the funds have been available to the constituencies. One of the things that we can pick out from what that fund is meant for, the key word is development. So I think the novel or the new approach by the current administration was to basically increase the fund. So in the process of increasing this fund, it also touched on other areas of development. And one of the key areas is sports development. I think there's a certain percentage, which is not more than 3%. It should be around 2% that should be going towards sports development in particular. And I think for the basketball community, they must be excited that the next, the increment from the budget speech indicates that we're going towards about 30 million plus in terms of the Constituency Development Fund. Now, if you look at Lusaka, let me take Lusaka for instance. This probably has about 7 constituencies, if I'm not mistaken. And 2% of that total amount, if you aggregate it, and then you have a plan to basically develop the sport, and this could be by way of having strategic sort of like approaches on how you develop the sport. Now, my belief and my opinion, because I've served in the executive before, has always been that when we talk about financing sport, we need to be looking at programming. We need to look at programs that basically develop the sport. There are categories of financing that comes from the corporate world, well-wishers, and the like. But sincerely speaking, the association or the federations, as they are able to come up with programs to develop the sport. And when we mean development of the sport, we don't necessarily mean the apex of the sport, because when we talk about development, I know in the general sense, people think we should be talking about the national championship, the prize monies and whatnot. Before we get to that level, we should be looking at what programs do we have in place at the very basic level. So I think in a nutshell, there is possibilities to access this these funds through the approach of developing the sport. Of course, the Constituency Development Fund has got procedures. So there are procedures which basketball should be able to understand. I'm aware that currently there is some form of amendments towards the Constituency Development Fund, and there are guidelines that have been developed. So I think those processes are still going on, but it will be important for the association to interact with its members of parliament and basically the constituency committees to be able to appreciate how to be able to access this financing. Parliament has got what you call constituency offices. It's open to any citizen, any person, to be able to go there and basically understand how this Constituency Development Fund works. It's a civic duty for any person.
Okay, so before we get to possibly maybe the guidelines and how this particular fund can be accessed by clubs, first of all, just allow me to bring in Tony. And with you, Tony, obviously, I will not throw you in the deep end with the Constituency Development Fund, but you are obviously welcome to share your thoughts on that. But first and foremost, we are still, or should I say, we haven't yet recovered, from the National Championship euphoria that we saw between Green Buffaloes and Material Magic. And it was an interesting showpiece between those two teams. And we saw quite a number of things happening during that weekend. But first of all, Tony, from you, I'd like to understand, from your perspective, how do you rate the National Championship? Was it a success compared to what we've seen in the past? A lot of people said, well, a lot of good things happened. It was never, like what we've seen in the past before. But from your perspective, would you say that it was a success?
Yeah, thanks for that. Reflecting back on the national championships, I would say from a spectator point of view, it was well attended, particularly the last game. And yes, I guess as a federation, we did host the game successfully. So I take that as a plus. And definitely it's something to build on, even for the future generations coming. I think it can only get bigger, and it does pose even more challenge for us to see how we can harness the opportunity that lies with this competition. I think it's really something that is taking shape. Looking at the BLL, both for the men and the female now, you may be aware that the two finalists in the female category do get an automatic qualification to participate in the women's regional BL tournament, which premiered last season, or rather last year. So it's positive. I think basketball is getting the right attention, both from the clubs. You can see how well prepared the clubs get to be. Also from a spectator perspective, which then entails that even from a support side of things, we are heading in the right direction. So I take that. It's a tick box, a job well done for the federation in what we try to do, and also overall just for the input that came from the teams and the spectators, because without them, that tournament wouldn't have kicked off in the manner it did.
Okay, so I'll definitely come back to you, Tony, and let me bring on Otema, who was explaining what clubs can do. Now, you've mentioned something very important. Whenever we talk about basketball development, whenever we talk about, I know that finance usually dominates the topic, but you rightly put it in your submission that it goes beyond that. And half the time we look at what the federation is not doing. And sometimes we get so caught up in that, and I'm speaking as a club right now, okay, not representing any club at the moment, but as a club, as a representative of a club at the moment, we get so caught up in what the federation is not doing that we forget what it is that we can do to be able to tap in this opportunity. So I want you to just speak more about what clubs can do. I know you started earlier on when you were talking about civic engagement. These clubs come from communities which have area representatives in form of councillors and members of parliament. What should clubs, first of all, do to be able to ensure that allocation that you spoke about earlier on, we could access it?
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. First of all, I would also like to commend the current Zambia Basketball Federation for the work that they're doing. They're doing a lot of good things. They've got programs running. They've got approaches to how to go forward. Of course, we could do better. First of all, the question is going to the club. You asked this to say, how do clubs actually access this? How do they get to participate in this the fund itself? Every constituency has got a structure. It starts at ward level and it goes on. So if you have a team that is playing within a certain ward or a constituency, there are structures within that and the leadership that supports the engagement. So if, for instance, I'll pick for obvious reasons, Matero Magic. Matero Magic is a team that plays in Matero. Within Matero constituency, there are different wards. And then within that ward, there's leadership. So there has to be an engagement by the executive of the club to be able to understand what that leadership means, because you have to moot your idea. You have to indicate what sort of programs you want from that development fund to fund, with specific terms, because every request has to have a deliverable. What do you want to see at the end of the day? So if the deliverables are not clear, it is not possible for the fund to work for you. And this is where now we get back to the federation. So for the clubs to benefit, every year clubs pay affiliation to the federation. Okay, and it's expected that through that affiliation that they pay, the federation should have some programs or approaches, the vision that should carry the club's aspirations forward. So these programs, these approaches, this vision must be codified. It must appear as a document. So for instance, if we did ask the ZBF to say, what is the strategic plan in place to respond to the CDF and the sports development approach that's there, you might be surprised and find that there's a gap. And this is why it is important for such platforms to start highlighting the many opportunities that basketball persons that love basketball don't have the opportunity to discuss. So we bring out the issue of how does the club benefit from CDF. So certainly every club should have elected officials. Generally, a club would have a chairperson, a secretary, a treasurer, a coordinator. It mirrors basically what you'd find in an association or a federation. So that structure and those roles must be enhanced to be able to respond to the CDF in their constituency. But wouldn't it be better if ZBF or the MBA or CBA had a deliberate approach to get to the Constituency Development Fund? Imagine at the beginning of the year, you know that the financial year now ends, I think, sometime in August or October, somewhere there. Between now and then, if there was a deliberate approach to look at this fund and get proposals through before we get to the finals or to somewhere halfway towards the season, we would know how much financing is coming through to ZBF. I mean, 30 million, and if you look at the percentage that I talked about for each constituency and you aggregated that money, we're talking about some good monies in the range of 2 to 3 million kwacha. So that would go a long way to developing the sport. But generally, we need to start looking at the strategic plans that help the club to be able to understand the role that they have to play in accessing this money. But it's a leadership issue, certainly.
You mentioned something very, very important. It is a leadership issue, and obviously structures must be put in place starting from the federation itself. Now, obviously, the federation can, okay, be able to mirror their strategic plan with the sole purpose of accessing or utilizing the opportunity that CDF offers. But if you look at the current scenario in our team or in our basketball circles, the majority of these teams are owned by individuals that are single-handedly funding them from A to Z, buying sneakers, paying affiliation, literally doing everything. So how then can the association be able to achieve what you mentioned earlier, that clubs also need to be able to, mirror their structure? Because when you say leadership, obviously it starts with the federation, and then it is cascaded to the clubs themselves. But when you find situations where this is a Wenson Mavoro club, okay, I can't do anything with Tony, I can't do anything with Otema, I call the shots because I pay the bills. So how can the federation, from your point of view, be able to tackle this? Should we see a policy deliberately compelling everybody or mandating everybody to ensure that for them to take part in the MBA, in the ZBF run associations or PBAs, this is what the clubs are supposed to look like with regards to structure? Should we see that?
Okay, that's a very, very, very important question that you've asked. The biggest resource in basketball is not the financing, it's the human resource. Basketball has got a vast reservoir of persons that are in very prominent positions, corporate, government, and otherwise. You'll be hard-pressed to find a person in leadership and at very high corporate level that has never played a sport. So it's a question of engagement. It's the approach that ZBF wants to engage others. I think leadership requires one to assess the capacities of those gaps that it has found. And the quicker you do so, the quicker the solutions come. So in essence, what we need to start doing is start putting up committees that are not affiliated to the politics of ZBA, but you have persons that would love to basically support basketball. I can name hundreds of persons that are in corporates today that have played in the league. They don't look like basketball players. Some look like sumo wrestlers, but they have a love of the sport and would be at the drop of a pen, be ready to come to basketball and say, I'm going to provide my technical skills to help the sport go further. So let's say, for instance, we're talking about, let me give you an example. Matero Magic. It's a championship team. It has won the league 11 times plus. Pedigree, very good systems. There are certain supporters of that team that are, they're, for lack of a word, they're goats or legends. Why is it not possible for Matero Magic to brand, to be in adverts, to be on billboard, on products? So that approach must then come from a team of persons out there that should look at basketball. I used to say when I was general secretary of basketball that basketball is the fastest growing sport in Zambia. Simply because
is it still growing?
Well, I should hope it is still growing, because I see a lot of very lanky, tall young men and women out there, and they're becoming taller than we were when we were playing. For the purposes of looking at what an average basketball player looks like, I think we're almost getting there. I remember when I coached the University of Zambia Pacers with my colleague at that time, Cuthbert Tembo, we were told that players, you needed very big players, tall, huge. But we worked with what we found. It was a sort of we had a sort of like a vision for what the Pacers was at that time. So for me, I feel strongly that we have not even tapped even a portion of the skill set that most of the future of basketball in this country is looking for. And I'm not just talking about height. I'm talking about the cross sports interactions. I'll give you an example. We in basketball, the basketball team had participated as a netball team, a male's netball team, and we actually probably got some medals. Joe Muhango, Sisi Kuntepa, and whatnot. It was a cross pollination, as it were, or a hybrid. Then we've had basketball players that can actually play in a different sports like volleyball because of that jumping and all that. Then we have, if you want to get good goalkeepers, you cannot miss a good goalkeeper without him having skills that are basketball related. So basketball is probably the most diverse sport where you find that a basketball player is multi-skilled. It is unlike any other sport. So if we start looking at tapping into the gaps of this sport and getting it to a level that we want to get, there has to be also a technical approach. Now, I've just veered away from what the topic was, which is basically financing. But I'm talking about getting persons or teams or committees set up specific to achieve a certain goal. It is high time, and you know, I send a message to my brother Maziko Piri, who I played with at the University of Zambia, that we shouldn't just be meeting in the streets. Hi, Otema, what? I'll call you that, until maybe some other time when it says, oh, Otema is not around anymore. There are skills, there are resources in this country, and it's up to the leadership. It's them that have taken up the mantle. Mr. Balamani, it's your time. Take up the initiative to call persons that could assist. We don't want positions. We don't want roles that are prominent in the political ZBA. But I don't think that all our resources in our head are all gone. I'm one person who's speaking with a passion. So if this passion can be translated into a project, as it were, to say, let's get from A to B, we'll get there. I'll say something. When we were attempting, we hosted the first time, you know, we had a band for like 4 years plus and whatnot. My former coach and the general secretary at that time, Bahati Luena, she was the general secretary, and she coached me, and then I took over as general secretary from her. The transition was so smooth that I could go back and ask, and of course I had Mr. Kambi and others. There is nothing in this world that is invented. We just refine the process. So until we realize as leaders that we are only refining processes, we are always going to be trying to create something that will not succeed. Success begins at realizing that we came from point A to point B. So I gave an example of an approach that we had at that time. We created platforms like, you know, developing 10-year plans and all those things. I took note of what is happening in the league right now. Can you tell me that you have a 10-year plan? We are not, when we speak like this, we don't speak to harm you. We want to improve the sport because we have passion. But if there are persons, Mr. Godfrey Mwanza there, Mr. Zimba, Mr. Quinten Mulenga, Mr. Oswald Kalamba, all these persons have got resources. We just need to be brought together. But of course, over the years, we have lost passionate persons that are not with us today. But we cannot lose the drive. So the essence of what we're trying to do here is to bring the other resources that are not in leadership to help us get to that goal. And I think we can do it. We have the leadership in place, and I think we have focused persons, but I think you need to, you know, stretch out a hand and call some of us and other people.
I love the fact that, you know, Otema, you've mentioned that the greatest resource that basketball has at the moment may not necessarily be the potential revenue or the existing revenue itself, but it's people. And basically, definitely, this show is about the people. So those of you that are joining this live broadcast, you are at liberty to comment and interact with us. And in our comment section, I've posted a link where I will accord you an opportunity to directly interact with my guests this evening and be able to ask them a question, if at all you have any, or just basically get to submit your 2 cents on the very important topic that we're looking at this evening, which has to do with basketball development. Now, let me come to you, Tony. And this time around, I know Otem has said a lot of things, but one of the important things that came in for me is the issue of the strategic plan. And obviously, you can't have leaders, okay, in a very big federation such as ours that don't have a plan. So, first of all, I have heard from the General Secretary, Mr. Roderick Ndlovu, who's been on this platform several times, saying there is a strategic plan in place already. So, what I would like to find out from you is, does this plan speak to opportunities such as the Constituency Development Fund as explained by Otema, or are we looking at the Federation beginning to align?
Thanks, thanks for that. And Otema, your comments are always welcome. I think you and we do interact on the corridors over the phone, and I do take note. To your question, yes, there is a strategic plan in place. I will be honest. Look, the Constituency Development Fund is relatively new, even for Zambia as a nation. And so part of our plan is education, of course, number one. And we have engaged the Ministry of Sport through National Sports Council. These are discussions that have been held. And this problem is not unique to basketball. There is a planned workshop which aims at training federation officials by National Sports Council on how they can harness the opportunity that is sitting in the Constituency Development Fund. So first and foremost, we need to get our education done. We need to know how we can access these funds. We also need to be realistic about to what extent these funds can help a club or can help basketball in Zambia at large. So I know I have heard of corridor talks about people deliberating, saying we're missing out opportunities. We could construct courts as big as NASDAQ. We could do that. Maybe we could, but honestly speaking, we need to get the education, which the Ministry of Sport is providing through National Sports Council. And once that is done, this would then cascade onto our affiliates and definitely will re-impact our strategic plan, because our strategic plan is running to 2026 for obvious reasons. That is the tenure of the current executive. And we have seen certain elements of that strategic plan starting to move. Some of them may not be as loud as we want them to be. And you know, when a tortoise is moving at times, you don't get to sit until you get to cross the finish line. But there are things that have been happening around basketball in the past 2-3 years. Slowly, maybe it's a coach taken to this place and ABCD. All those things are part of our strategic plan. Of course, we also need to align our strategic plan to what FIBA is trying to do. And right now, FIBA is pushing a program called FIBA Plus, which really aims at redefining the operations of national federations. So even within that program, there are certain things that we slowly trying to implement. For example, the new structures that you saw come up may not have been there 10 years ago. All those are part of the strategic plan to try and enhance the delivery of the sport and administration of the sport in the country. So yes, we are on course with our strategic plan. Certain blocks moving faster than others, certain slower than others, but definitely we are concerned around what's happening in basketball. Allow me just to also respond to the cause around involvement of stakeholders. I think those that know me and those that do interact with me, I'm one person who pushes through people. And most of the events that we do hold as a federation, as a result of such efforts, I'll give an example. We've brought back Mr. Kalamba to run the Referees Association. It's because we realize we need that expertise, and we need those people who can give us those pushes. We do have a lot of people we do give assignments to work. One item would be on the technical side. I think the heads that run that technical department, I don't even know what goes on there. But there is a host of knowledge, and we do consult with these individuals within the basketball family. Thanks.
Okay, so before I move to Otema, just building on what you've said, one of the things that I would like to find out from you as well is, in your earlier submission, you mentioned something very important, Tony, the issue of unprecedented support that was shown during the national championships. We are talking about Green Buffaloes versus Matera Magic. What I would like to find out from you as a treasurer, from a revenue perspective, first of all, did you see an opportunity in that overwhelming support that you described?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that answer is reflective in the numbers themselves that flocked to the games. I think we practically ran out of seats at some point. So we do have an opportunity for revenue uplift from this particular competition. I mean, we had people walk up to us and bluntly tell us that your VIP seats are too cheap, because it seems like everyone is sitting in the VIP session. So in the next edition, why don't you charge as much as 250 kwacha? And this is coming from people because they want to sit comfortably. And you could easily point out to maybe 50, 100 people echoing such sentiments. So that is a plus. But we can't leverage on that if we can't improve the experience around the championships. I think for those that came to the games, they will agree with me that the experience may not have been so much as great as they needed it to be. So what do I mean about experience? Can we go beyond just the game that's being played? One thing that we did add, for example, the players, they did enjoy. I think this is uh, the best championships in terms of medical attention that the players got, and everyone will attest to that. People would get massages before the game, people would get massages after the game, people would have any ailments that they thought needed to be treated. So how do we then extend that experience? And everything else that we do could then result into bigger revenue uplift. Because if I'm looking at NASDAQ, I can only sell so many tickets and I can only charge so much. But how do I then utilize the space that we have there to broaden the experience for the spectators coming through to watch the games? Could we then look at having the games beamed directly outside the arena, and you have people who could watch from outside and also pay something else? And that's something that we could try and explore. But obviously we need to see how we can plan for it. It's not something that can happen overnight, but definitely the opportunity is massive in the numbers that we are seeing at the games.
Interesting submission there, Mr. Tony. And I love the fact that, you have highlighted that the Federation is willing to be able to explore all these opportunities surrounding what we saw during the national championships. What I would like to find out from you is, if, say, an entity came that would partner with the association to be able to give you a strategy that could manifest everything that you just highlighted here, is it something that your team would be open to?
100%. You see, part of being in leadership entails that you understand your limitation, and not to point a finger at anyone. I can do things better in the areas that I manage in terms of the federation, but I would probably need someone who's more experienced than me to help me do that. Or I would probably need to get maybe informed training, whatever it could be. So these are the federation, and I had a chat around what is the federation in our basketball context. It's not the people sitting in these so-called positions, because really, if it was up to them, basketball would not exist in Zambia. But you and me both know, who've been around this game, we've seen national teams travel on one person's pocket, and maybe that person was not even a member of the executive. So the federation really is everyone, and people there listening out, maybe catching us live today. It's really a call and saying, guys, come to us and tell us, look, guys, I think we can do this, and this is my contribution, and that will be most meaningful for us, trust me, and even for Zambia as a whole. But if we wait until we have that one leader, it's not going to happen. Some of us are in these positions only because we cared so much about the sport that there was no one else to do the job, and we tried to say, okay, let me volunteer my extra time to do it. But really, we need everyone who loves this sport to come on. That is the federation. Those are the people that form this federation, this sport that we love so much.
And you know, before I get to Mr. Masuka here, you've mentioned something very interesting. You know, I've heard people who would get emotionally charged when they are challenged by people to say, well, why are we not doing this? Perhaps why are we not doing this? And the word volunteer would come. You know, I'm just a volunteer. I don't get paid to do this. And personally, I feel it's a wrong statement. I'm not saying you have said it, Tony, and I'm not going to say anybody. Well, I'm not going to say a name, but this is something that we've heard people say as an excuse. You know, I'm just volunteering to be this and that. I mean, leadership is about responsibility. And you as a leader that is interacting with us here, kudos for having the courage to come up here and talk to people. But I want to find out from you, is this culture what we are going to see as we begin 2024 season? Are we going to hear leaders, Tony, such as yourself, use the word, I'm not a volunteer, I mean, I'm just a volunteer, I don't get paid to do this? Are we going to hear that from you, sir?
Well, you probably won't hear that from me, not in 1,000 years. For a position that I willingly took up. Look, as I stand for something, and part of my values are dedication, you know, commitment. Personally, even before I took up the realms of federation executive member, I have single-handedly volunteered, if you like, my time and my personal resources to advance basketball in an area I love so much called Bulldogs, where I drive the engine, I do everything. There's a time I used to wash jerseys, even wash jerseys for the team, the kids to play, and do all that stuff. But never have I ever said I'm just a volunteer. If something needs to be done and we've agreed to do it, why shouldn't we do it? If you can't do it anymore, stop doing it, because you're hurting the sport by holding on. Believe it or not, you're just doing more damage to it. So if you can't do it, and for example, anytime you feel you've fallen out of love with the game of basketball, just raise your hand. I think you get more respect by the people watching you over that, as opposed to holding on to something that you're dragging it by the tail. So it doesn't make sense for anyone in leadership to refer to themselves as volunteers. I'm just a volunteer. Yes, we are volunteers by the nature of the job, but when a task is called upon and for whatever reason we are unable to complete the task, we just raise our hand. Sometimes just say, this didn't work out, and look, guys, I'm owning up. We didn't do it well. We should have done it better, and we commit to do it better. And that's the kind of mindset I carry with me. So definitely not going to hear that from me.
Okay, that's a very, very encouraging assurance over there from you. And coming to you, Otema, there was something very interesting that Tony had alluded to earlier on about talking about aligning the strategy which is there with what FIBA, or with the direction from FIBA. And we know that that move is strategic in itself, in the sense that it attracts FIBA to be able to support, because it shows that you are like-minded, or you are steering in the same direction with the governing body at a global level that is looking at the affairs of the game of basketball. Now, one of the things that I have seen, the Constitutional Development Fund or Act has to do with the issue of women and youth. These have a very, very emphatic kind of tune attached to them within the Act. The grants for women, the grants for youth. Basketball obviously is one sport that has a lot of young people. It attracts a lot of young people. And when you talk about women, we have been running the women's league for a long time now. And what I wanted you to speak to would be, what is it that possibly clubs that reside in these constituencies can come up in form of projects for both young people and women to be able to become attractive, for this particular funding?
Thank you very much for that question. But before I just go into that question, let me put it on record that Tony, Mr. Balamani, is a very proactive person. In my interactions with him, I've always had a very positive interaction with him. I just have to put it on record that he has made a number of attempts to get a lot of things done in the background, and he doesn't blow his own trumpet. Let me just put that on record. But your question is a very important question, and we don't invent the wheel. We refine processes. What can basketball learn from any other sport? Let me take you to swimming. Let me take you to football. Let me take you to netball. Let me take you to judo. Are we scoring at the same level that those other sports are scoring at? It is not unheard of for the sport to emulate or to imitate practice. So there are practices that are happening in football. We know, as of yesterday's scoreline between our national team, the sport team, and the other team. We don't want to mention that it has been other team. So if we have to ask ourselves to say, which is the best team, better team right now in Zambia, we have it that it's women. So if these women come from these same communities, the young ladies that become national team players, it is evident that there is a program and a system that exists. So in essence, the answer to that question is, what are others doing that we are not? Let me give an example. If we look at the word development itself, there are key indicators that we need to put in place. For instance, there are tournaments that are specific to the girl child, to women in schools, in universities, must increase. So my belief is that the more exposure young women and young ladies, young men have to the sport, the more likely the progress ratios and the progression in the sport will be seen. So if, for instance, if we did simple numbers from, we are 2024, so we say maybe 2014, from 2014 to 2024, how many tournaments are specific to women or youth in a calendar year? That's a deliverable. If you then quantify how many there are, you will be able to know how much exposure you are getting. So really, the essence of sport is exposure. Now, how do we get this? How do we get to that place? So if we have the CDF, and I just noticed that there was a message somewhere that said it's difficult to access and whatnot. basketball players are in the business of doing the impossible. We are very different sportsmen. So we don't have that mindset that it's difficult. Let me just put that on record. So if we have to deliver on getting ourselves to that level, we need to ask ourselves, the key word is sports development. So we must measure how many, even bilateral tournaments or trilateral tournaments where you have 3 nation tournaments, whatnot. We used to have those back in the days, even at the lowest level, schools, and then we get to maybe colleges and universities. We must start hosting here in Zambia. I think
Okay, so we seem to be having a little bit of audio challenge there from Mr. Otema Musuka. But obviously, once it comes back, we will definitely hand over the floor to him to be able to conclude his thoughts. But Tony, let me come to you. And obviously, the question on the screen that Otema was answering had to do with the issue of CDF being difficult. But obviously, he was laboring to explain how that perception perhaps could be changed. But Ephraim O'Neill Mutondo goes on to ask a few things about finance, like how have you planned, say for 2024, you know, the surface, for example, regular cleaning, marking, logistics, prices. I know prices is always an issue. You have, you know, the target amount running through the year. Do you have a target amount, you know, running for the year? He's also talking about the issue of who have you partnered with in terms of sponsorship. Do you have a specific budget to achieve all these things that you can make public?
Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for that question, Ephraim. So twofold. We, as sports federations, one of the requirements that we do on a yearly basis, and something we've done consistently as Zambia Basketball Federation, is aligned to the ministry timelines. So last year we had a deadline of December to submit our budget for Q1, which is January to March, based on the activities that we proposed to undertake to the Ministry of Sport through National Sports Council. I will put my head on the chopping board and I will say, as Zambia Basketball Federation, we met that deadline. We submitted that budget. So that is one end of the coin. The other side of the coin is that we are planning to have an AGM in the next week. This will be the first AGM that will be held, I think, before March, in my opinion, because most of the AGMs, you can bear witness to me that we have them after April and so forth. They end up affecting. What we are doing as a federation is that before that AGM commences, we will have a planning session with the rest of the stakeholders in basketball. So these are your provincial sports representatives. So that will be held, and that planning will inform the area, your question around have you drafted a budget and so forth. So that will be the secondary budget that will come out of that planning meeting based on what input we are going to receive from the provincial representatives. So that is a plus, and I think that is something we're doing differently this year. Have we partnered with any sponsors? I would say everything that we are doing is work in progress. So it's not a no, and again, it's not a yes. Do we have a targeted amount in terms of what we want for prize money? No, I would say no. We don't have a targeted amount, but I think the conversations around our planning, the conversations around our meetings with stakeholders would then inform that amount that can be raised for the next national championship prize money. And also just to mention that from where I sit, prize money does not become a priority in the tournament that we plan to host, or in the tournaments that we plan to host. Not to underplay the importance of rewarding teams that win, because we are cognizant of the cost implications. But like I earlier mentioned, we can do better to improve the experience in the national championship itself. We have good venues in Zambia. We've got a venue in Kawambwa. Could we then make a way of transporting teams and let Kawambwa experience the Matero Magic versus Buffalo in Kawambwa, packed with the guys there, something like that? So how much more can we do in terms of an experience that we can offer, as well as obviously the ultimate reward of prize money for the teams? And also just relooking at the competition itself. So it's a whole host of things, and prize money is part of the conversation. But I would say to focus entirely on raising prize money as a measure of success would be failure on our part.
Okay, interesting submission there. And you've talked about the issue of decentralizing the location for the games, and this is something that we discussed with Roderick last week when he was here, and he equally, I think, echoed similar sentiments to yours about the willingness from the federation itself. Now, I want to know, okay, before I go to my question, I've just seen something very interesting, Tony. There's a comment here. He said, "Mama 27-0, we prioritize the money."
No, that's why we said it's important. It's important, it's important. It's important. And we won't underplay it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I like this comment, from Nikki, talking about the effort that goes into the 27-0 and being able to win. I mean, congratulations once again to the Lusaka Basket Queens for such feat. We will not stop talking about it because it's a record that is worth noting and will forever be inscribed in the annals of basketball history. But just not to veer off from what we're talking about, but just allow me to ride on Nikki's issue here. People may not say it, but inside, okay, these guys would like to know, have they been paid their money? You being the treasurer here, maybe you can help us. Have they been paid their money?
I'll borrow your terms in the media. At broadcast time, we have not remitted the funds to the deserving winners. However, I think the last communication that we had this afternoon is that they will receive their monies tomorrow.
Okay, interesting there. Interesting there. We've got I know Mr. Otema right now is trying just to be able to get back his network, and he's having a little bit of challenges, but he's still with us though. And Mr. Otema, maybe what you can do, you can try to use audio only for now. We'll see how that works out. And then if at all it works out just fine, we can continue with the conversation. If not, please keep trying and giving us that video feed as well so that we can talk to you. Ephraim O'Neill is back again in our comment section saying one way we can tap into CDF is by going back to schools. Communities are interested mostly in education as they are developing schools through CDF. Maybe we can jump in as they also build, renovate courts. But let's bring back events that can attract schools and the community at large. The inter-schools basketball, the interprovincial, and the Felix Tilesha Memorial Tournament. That way we can improve infrastructure and grassroots basketball. So teams can use these facilities for practice. Now, I know, Tony, you earlier on spoke about this, but I feel this is something that requires much emphasis. And remember, part of what we're looking at this evening is also what should people expect in the new season. Obviously, the AGM is coming. A lot of things will be discussed. and hopefully a communique will be shared to everybody else just to keep us on the same page with what it is that will be agreed on as stakeholders within the game of basketball. But building on what Ephraim is asking, do we expect to see such kind of things coming back this season? You know, the inter-schools, the college basketball, and all these structures that we can make use of. Is this something that the Federation is also keenly looking at?
Yeah, and spot on, Ephraim. I mean, that is a very, 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 very wonderful comment. To be honest, the problem with schools basketball is something that is haunting basketball enthusiasts. I mean, you can bear witness. Everyone else who's been around the game does remember a time when school basketball was indeed happening. The biggest challenge we have, and I'll be blunt about it, some other people may not like my comment, but I'll say it as is, and that is my opinion as a person, and not necessarily the position of the Federation. Who is running sport in school? That's one question I can ask. I used to run an academy based in Northmead, and we used to practice from a school in Northmead. We had good relations with the school. We produced sportsmen for that school. That school excelled at sport, particularly in the sport of basketball. One morning, we woke up to a rude shock that our court had been uprooted and replaced with a tent for a religious organization. That was 7 years ago. We have since never returned to that facility. We now use a facility that is 5, 10, 6, 7 kilometers away from our catchment zone. That has hindered development, not only for us as an academy, but also for the school. Who is managing sports in schools? And maybe it's a challenge to ZBF to try and bridge that gap and get into schools. Because as long as we do not have a touch in school, or we ourselves are not in touch with the schools, these agendas, we can't leave it to the schools to push as basketball enthusiasts. And that is a truth of the matter. A named school in Matero was so successful as a high school team, and because they leveraged on certain individuals who were associated with the basketball fraternity. And we've seen that here in Lusaka. I'll talk about Lusaka. We've seen it's the same happen in Munali. Munali was obviously at one point, Kamwala, you talk of Kamwala, same thing. But the moment these people who are in touch with basketball and then are no longer being associated with the named school, we've seen that the programs at the schools they don't advance. So it's an uphill battle for us to try and get into the schools, and we have to be very tactful on how we do it, mindful that traditionally sport in school is run by a PE teacher. But the question is the PE teacher enough to drive sport, and not only basketball, but just any kind of sport at a particular school or learning institution? And definitely the answer is no. So how do we then start to position ourselves as a federation to start having a conversation in that boardroom when schools are deciding what to do, and they can say, we can get basketball people here to drive our activities, or we want our children to play basketball. So it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle.
Okay, so we've got another interesting comment here from Kandala, who says, Treasurer, do you have an idea what costs a team to play the whole championship from the playoffs to the finals for you to say prize money is not that important. Okay, there was a caveat to that statement, by the way. E.g., Magic going to the Copperbelt, coming back to Lusaka for the remainder of the games on the road to the finals. So on this one, now, I know that you had put a caveat to the statement, okay? Probably, I think maybe Kandala didn't get it, but you did put a caveat to the statement. But building up on what Kandala is trying to justify here, should teams not look at the championship as a way, for example, to recoup what is put in? If not, then what is it that teams should be able to look out for? And I'm asking this to say, are we ever, for example, going to see the Zambia Basketball Federation, like, I'll borrow what YBL did, or I'll refer to what YBL did. Your team, your academy, by the way, did exceptionally very well. Tony, your academy Bulldogs did exceptionally very well. I covered that tournament. I was there. I think they won in multiple categories, if I'm not mistaken. Congratulations for that good work and your leadership. And one of the prizes there was scholarships for them to be able to go to Cavendish University. So are we looking at the federation, for example, if you are not in a position to be able to create a prize money that would help team recover the cost? Are you looking at spreading your wings, say, bring on board scholarships? For example, the youngest member of a basketball team, Bulldogs Basketball Club, if it has those that are still in high school, university, they can have an opportunity to be able to access those scholarships and be able to proceed, to the university. If not, there are so many other things, that we can look at, the corporates that we can partner with in terms of maybe support for these specific clubs. It may not be necessarily the money, but what if Lusaka Basket Queens, has got a Nikki who has a talent of, sewing clothes or fashion or whatever it is that Nikki does, and you are able to bring in sponsors that can be able to give Nikki some sort of capital or support her. I hope you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, Tony. Are we looking at the federation also expanding their horizons with regards how team can be rewarded when we talk about the national championships?
100%. And we I think for lack of a better term, that's the biggest headache we have, really. It doesn't sit well with any well-meaning individual to not reward anyone to the fullest potential possible. Granted, we do have a lot of work to do in that area, and it's no secret to anyone in the basketball fraternity. And we will, like I spoke of earlier, that is part of the experience. How can we enhance the experience? So we are looking for opportunities, and trust me, this will be a topical issue in our planning meeting, because part of the commitment I'm making, and I believe other members of the federation have made, even for us to stage this championship, is that we need to start rewarding teams. How we do it, we need to get to that point where we can reward teams, and teams can find it meaningful to participate in this tournament, not only for the sake of them getting to bow. Maybe we could say, for example, as winners of the championship, guess what? We're going to cover your $3,000, which is your participation fee for the first round of bow. I mean, that's some relief to give to a club, and so forth. Or will also help with maybe player licensing fees and so forth. And it's my dream. Maybe it will not be actualized in my term, but it's my dream that we will get to a stage where, when basketball is played in Zambia and it's the top competition, which is the national championship, it really is rewarding. We probably can't reward a team for the amounts of money they've spent to get to the national championships. Let's not even just talk about the costs in the national championships. But to get to the national championships, you guys have been playing basketball from March to November. We can only imagine how much you are spending for all during that period, and it can't be compared to the amounts of money you're going to spend in the 1 month period of the national championships. But could we make it worth your while? Yes, we definitely need to do that, and it's no secret that we can do better as a federation to enhance our sport.
Okay, let me now draw your attention to the issue of accountability. I know that earlier on you again made a very important commitment, Tony, when you highlighted the fact that for you, it is not only about, I mean, for you, the preoccupation is doing the work and not necessarily, what excuse can be given, such as I'm just a volunteer and everything. But, accountability is something that a lot of people become uncomfortable with in many spheres of life the moment it is demanded. And what they don't understand is that by the mere fact that you are in a position of leadership, then the people you lead have the right to demand accountability from you, because that is part of the package that comes with leadership. So one of the things that I'd like to confirm from you, Tony, when we talk about accountability is you talked about the issue of the AGM that you'll be having this week. And I believe the AGM is a very important meeting that obviously will determine how the rest of the year will look like in terms of what people will run with. And what I'm told is that in the last meeting, the financial statements coming from your office, if I'm not mistaken, were really below what somebody would expect. And people had no opportunity to be able to ask questions. It was just a one-page document, and people were wondering, okay, if we ran the whole year, if we had a championship and we're only given half a paragraph with regards to a financial statement, does this demonstrate accountability? And are we likely to see the same thing repeat itself in the AGM that is coming forth, if at all what I just said happened in the last AGM, Tony?
Thanks for that. And it's good to have such candid conversations, because social media at times and WhatsApp groups may not be reflective of what really happens on the ground. Well, I think on behalf of the Federation, the report provided gave a representative of what had happened in terms of funds that were actualized by the Federation and utilized by the Federation. Beyond that, if there were people who expressed certain concerns around certain lines of income or certain lines of expenses, I didn't get that report. I think on the record, in attendance in the AGM, we had, I think, less than 12 attendance for that AGM for one reason or the other. But
less than 12.
Yeah, that would be corridor talk. That would be corridor talk. So
how many people were expected?
So as per constitution, it was representation from the PBAs, that is Midlands, Copperbelt, Muchinga, Northern Luapula, Southern Province. Yeah, that should cover the affiliates for that particular financial year. So in terms of expenses, and I think the report was presented, I saw in certain WhatsApp groups, I saw a few questions around what was just the format of the report, maybe a few positive suggestions suggesting that we should have compared what was happening last year with what's happening this year, and that was taken note, and I think it will be reflective in the forthcoming report. Yeah, generally that, and just to mention, as affiliates, generally.
So Tony, sorry, just to cut you.
Sure.
For the satisfaction of my curiosity, are you saying that people that were supposed to be in attendance in that particular AGM were actually not in attendance. And yet we have people that are talking outside when they had an opportunity to be part of a meeting and to be able to raise issues. Is that what you're saying right now?
So I would say yes and no, in the sense that with the current constitution, clubs speak through their representatives, and that being their general secretary of the association. So if a concern is raised from an individual in a particular provincial association, the concern has to be raised through their general secretary. So if their general secretary is in the AGM and does not raise that issue that has been presented to them by their affiliate, it may mean that maybe they feel that the question being posed by the affiliate holds no ground, or they choose to ignore it. So those are the kind of situations that we have. But I can confirm Midlands was in that meeting, Copperbelt was in that meeting, Southern Province was not in that meeting, Eastern Province was in that meeting, Muchinga was not in that meeting, but Northern Province was in that meeting. Luapula was not in that meeting. So that sort of sets the tone. We did have representation from the coaches in that meeting, as well as representation from the referees in that meeting.
Okay, so okay, Otema is with us right now. It's good to have you back, Otema. Quickly, Martin would like to know, when is the AGM?
The AGM is stated for 3rd of February.
Okay, and Martin, again, just real quickly, who is allowed to attend the AGM? I think he probably did not hear, so you could just maybe run through so that he understands exactly who is supposed to attend this AGM, and possibly if Martin has issues that he would like to be presented, how can he possibly get his submit or make his submission?
Thank you. So it is the attendance in the AGM is as follows: the members of the National Executive Committee, a member of the National Sports Council, members of the Referees Association, a member of the Coaches of Association, provincial association leaders, executive members attend that meeting. A player representation is also needed from the players' union. We have provision to have associate members attend, and these associate members are the schools basketball representative. We also have associate members from the Wheelchair Basketball Association. The other associate member to be incorporated are academies. So those who are running sports academies in the country. Of course, they would also need to have fully affiliated to the federation. Those are the people who attend, and including a representation from National Olympic Committee of Zambia.
Okay, and I think that also answers Nikki's question. Otema is back with us. Are you able to hear me, Otema?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay,
sorry for that.
Very...
I had to change and go somewhere where there was better reception.
Okay, no, it's good that we have you back once again. So we were talking about, obviously what we're discussing is the Constituency Development Fund, and this is something that I really want you to weigh in on. But please be at liberty to also speak to other issues that you feel are very pertinent to the development of the game of basketball in this country. You are at liberty to do so on this platform. And just to come back to you, Tony earlier on mentioned, you know, the tragedy that happened with Bulldogs Basketball Club, you know, them being evicted from a place where they were building something solid for the community and helping a lot of young people. We've seen a similar situation in Matero where, you know, Matero Magic Basketball Club, apparently, you know, the decision to be able to move to NASDAQ, I know there were other factors, but to my knowledge, also was due to the fact that the court which has produced all the greats that we know from Material Magic, all of a sudden had issues, with the people that were responsible for managing that particular place. I want to find out from you, Otema, you spoke about the issue of engagement. Do you think that if clubs became more organized, as you earlier on alluded to, and went and interacted with these school authorities, stipulated vividly their objectives, where they're going, with the help of the civic leadership, are we likely to see a reduction in terms of such kind of occurrences that obviously disturb, good things that we've seen? Bulldogs is one of those teams, I would say, which has done a remarkable job within the area of North Mid Garden, Chilulu, building strong players that today are able to represent even in the Midlands. And very soon, I know, in fact, Harrison Banda, if I'm not mistaken, is a product of Bulldogs. Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong. He's there in the national team. He's played for the Basketball Africa League, Material Magic, Pacers, and name all these other clubs. So these are some of the positives that are coming out. But do you think if that approach was taken, it would then give clubs some sort of leverage not to be pushed around whenever a church, not that I'm against churches, whenever a church came and say, we need Bulldogs out, we're going to destroy the court, pitch a tent and start praying here?
Okay, this is very, very important. This discussion we should have been having some years back. I think if we take the leaf from what happened on the Copper Belt, we noticed that after the privatization of parastatals, which were heavily supporting sports, there was a transition that basically caused the decline of basketball, because the facilities were maintained and the facilities were specific for sports activities. I think going forward, the trend will be, because other organizations or institutions will be fighting to get space. So part of the available space is basically playgrounds and parks and the like. So I think it should be a deliberate policy for engagement, as basically all the federations should engage the Ministry of Sports in addressing this very dangerous development, because the areas that were initially designated for sports are now areas of worship, as it were, and other activities. So yes, certainly this is a very serious concern. But I think we have also within that concern an opportunity. Like we have indicated, CDF basically is meant for sports development. Now, when I was speaking earlier on, I spoke about one aspect of sports development, which was basically hosting tournaments, which regional, international tournaments. We need to start getting into the mind frame that we align ourselves to the FIBA calendar when the under 16, the under 18s, senior national team, we need to host those. But to do so, quality stadium, quality venues, we would need to. The whole activity of tournaments has got a trickle-down effect, and it does actually affect the economy, because then you've got resources that are coming in and revenue that's coming into the association and also to the nation in terms of forex. So it's basically a development issue. Now, if we look at your question to say there are these developments, prior to what happened to, let's say, Matero or Bulldogs, we had the famous Lutas sports arena there. It's not too long ago. So basketball has been hit, and we need now to appreciate that we are in a crisis. So the only way we can deal with the crisis is if we start looking at strategies to do basically to surmount or overcome this challenge. One of the ways to do so is to basically have a very serious engagement with the government, because they are the ones that lead with the policies and the legislation that would help basketball and other sports to be able to achieve what they need to do. So let me ask this question: if at all there is this change and there's this development in the women's sport like soccer, and they are scoring, they are doing they're getting to high levels of performance. How is this not corresponding to basketball? What are the challenges that are unique to basketball? Until we look in the mirror, until we start doing an introspection, we will basically be coming up with piecemeal arrangements that are not, basically looking at the whole picture. This is why we must treat the development of basketball not at the senior level, at the very basic level. I would also suggest that there has been a number of attempts, and I think I need to commend the ZBF and the provincial basketball associations for the initiatives that are currently going on. I think all that is needed is alignment and synergies. I hope what is translating in the Midlands is also translating in the Copper Belt, is also translating in the southern part of the country, in the western part of the country, eastern part of the country. We have heavily concentrated the development of this sport along the line of rail. And then that comes with its own challenges. But if, for instance, we were to start looking at development of sports in the rural setting, where the sport can be introduced at a level where we would capture a talent that should be able to meet the standards of a national team at whatever level, from the junior most to the senior team, we would actually have a pool of excellent players. We also must be able now, I think when we have these structures like players associations, coaches associations, let me ask this question. What sort of interaction do our coaches have with other coaches? Let's say, when do we have a deliberate attempt to send our coaches to Mozambique for 4 weeks, for a year, for 2 weeks? Or on attachment, we could actually write to these associations and have them there. I remember not too long ago, the Mozambique coach made a statement, I think that got a few of our coaches upset. And he mentioned something to the sort of like, you have the players, we just need to just do better with the coaching. I would have taken that as a positive in a way. But then I think that was not taken too friendly by certain quarters. But if we look at the holistic picture, I have spoken about participation. I've spoken about infrastructure.
So Otema, there's a quick question for you from Nikki. When you talk about interactions, Nikki wants to know that who should be responsible to fund those interactions between the coaches or among the coaches, as you suggested.
Okay, this is well noted. I think the ZBF has got partnerships with the National Olympic Committee. It's got partnership with the National Sports Council. It has also got partnerships with other foreign sports federations that can support. I remember some time back we had interaction with the Norwegian Paralympic Committee, which helped us, get funding, and we had processes that go on. Part of the way we need to view the needs of an association is similar to the way NGOs do it, similar to the way government. There's a needs assessment. You need to understand what it is you need to achieve what you want to do. This is different from the strategic plan, by the way. So if we say, for instance, that we need to get our coaches on the same page, there has to be deliberate platforms that get the coaches to regularly meet and basically discuss these issues. We have excellent coaches. I think some of the best in the hemisphere. But what we needed to do is to have an honest interaction. There's a transition between the old school and the new school. The fundamentals to the set play, set point arrangements. So these skills must be able to interact throughout. We've always had a benchmark. Zambia knows that if it beats Zimbabwe if it meets Mozambique and struggled us against Angola, we are halfway better than we were before. But what strategy do we have to beat Angola? As opposed to how did we perform against Zimbabwe or Malawi even? So we need to start interacting at that level. When do we constitute national teams? What are the requirements to set a national team? These are budget items. These are supposed to be properly budgeted. And this comes from the coordination era. Mr. Andrew, my brother, that's firmly in his ambit. So we need those particular thinking levels from the most basic grassroots all the way to the federation to be able to harness the technical skills that we require to be at a high level. Now, if we said, for instance, that we wanted to get the coaches to a level where we are saying they are performing at a very high level. We have excellent coaches, obviously, but how do we gauge this? Every year at the national championship, if I look at the number of games that are played in relation to a federation like Zimbabwe or a federation like Tanzania, and we play 30 games less than they play in a season, then I have to ask ourselves whether we really are developing. So there must be benchmarks or the technical side on the number of plays. When I was joining back the call, okay, I think Tony was mentioning something about AGMs, when they're held and whatnot. This is a perennial problem. How do we resolve the AGM issue where it does not disrupt international and also the focus of basketball? We know when our rain season happens, we have 3 basic seasons. There is no apparent reason why we should still hold AGMs at the time. This is simply unacceptable in a time that we could plan for them. So, these are the interactions that I speak about. Yeah.
Okay. So just allow me to bring in Tony here. Obviously, we did not hear the last part from Otema, but in case you have a question, Tony, you are at liberty to be able to ask Otema, perhaps to repeat what he said, should you require a clarification. But for you, Tony, the most interesting thing about my show is that it gives people an opportunity to be able to interact with you, the leaders. And, because of that, we try to accommodate as many people as possible. And so I've got a person in my inbox, Tony, right now, who has chosen or requested me to be able to maintain anonymity for the sake of their, I don't want to say safety, because I know you want to beat them up. You're a good man. You're a good man. But what they would like to find out, Tony, is...
Sounds with the game. Yeah.
Yeah, so this person has an interesting view that I thought I should bring out, so that since you are here, Tony, I mean, why not, if you can respond to it. So this guy says Mr. Mulemo is more lecturing than anything else. The problem is that people protect themselves a lot of the time, and most of these leaders we give a lot of hopes in. We give a lot of hopes in us even before they have any source of income. Okay, interesting. Don't promise what they know will happen. They call you a liar because you tell the truth. And then he says, well, some of us are scared to comment and everything, but would be glad if you can. So this man, Tony, is outrightly saying, sir, you are being a very interesting politician here. And then he feels that you leaders are in the habit of promising people heaven, yet you can't even deliver Canaan. So what are your thoughts, on that, Tony? Is it the case, Because what I want to avoid is, remember those corridor talks that you referred to,
yes.
People speaking in corners and everything, but we need to address issues as they are. So this person feels that you people promise a lot, and yet under deliver?
I think there's, I wouldn't say there's some truth. I wouldn't say there's malice in the question there. Admittedly so, and probably admit on the rest of the team that we work with. There are areas we have failed to live up to deliver. Certain expectations that we have not met. But the reality of the truth is that we are well-meaning in everything that we do. And for me personally, basketball has not given me anything. Rather, it has taken away so much from me as an individual. So yes, and we've seen it in sports. People have gotten positions and they've gained so much. Some have even been prosecuted by the courts. I mean, this happens world over, and Zambia is not immune to such kind of instances. But I would like to just retaliate the stance or the position of the current executive is that we are trying to do our best in the smallest way possible to try and make a difference within the time that we are here. It's quite vast, and some of the things that we do may not be seen instantly. Okay. And so it may only be felt maybe after we are gone, but we are taking those steps to ensure that we do what we need to do.
Okay, so I've got again another anonymous from the inbox who is challenging what you said. And they are saying the AGM was just for the chairman and the GSS. Not even some people with positions within the structures of basketball were allowed to attend. Mr. Tony is lying. So I would like to find out. And with that, maybe you can also just explain the structure of if we are getting feedback like this, do you think that the AGM itself is inclusive?
It's interesting you've mentioned your last remarks, and I'll probably get hanged for saying this. This is a conversation we had last night while attending a colleague's funeral around the structure of the AGM. Now, these documents are in public domain, okay? There is an adopted constitution. The constitution spells out who should be in the AGM, okay? It does that. And if I was on I'm using my mobile, if I was on my laptop, I would just maybe send you a screenshot to Beam for the sake of everyone joined in online. But what happened, and maybe I could just explain that, so just indulge me, is that when we moved from Zambia Basketball Association, which was made out of clubs, to Zambia Basketball Federation, which is made up of associations. Now, just that definition I have highlighted spells out who are the affiliates of ZBF versus who are the affiliates of ZBA, Zambia Basketball Association. So from the moment we entered into a federation, the club speaks through the association. That is what that constitution that was adopted and sent to National Sports Council, endorsed by National Sports Council, entails. So constitutionally, when an invitation for the Zambia Basketball Federation AGM is sent, the delegates are from its constituents, who are the association. The association is Provincial Basketball Association executives. And you are in the corporate world, you know that the executive would be the general secretary and the chairman of the provincial association. outside the provincial association, it then extends its membership to members of the coaches association. So again, from the coaches association, the head of the coaches association and the general secretary. The same will apply for the referees association. The same will apply for the players union association, and so forth. Those are the ones that form the constituents or the members to attend that AGM. So anything that is happening in the referees space shall be channeled through those two delegates who attend the AGM. Now, the constitution in itself was well thought, and the intention was good. Remember, it assumed that Zambia would be looking at.
So Tony, Tony, when you say the constitution was well thought and well intended, obviously it's very important, and I agree with you. But if it is not achieving or speaking to the wishes and aspirations of the people that you're leading, don't you think then that calls for perhaps reconsideration? And I say this because earlier on you said there could be a gap between what if the head of the Referees Association is not speaking, communicating effectively the desires and aspirations and the will of the people in their constituency back to the overall AGM for policy response and formulation. What I want to know is, don't you think something should be done in this case? Because we are now going to look like the federation is not doing its part. Like the federation is not really, like the federation has a scheme to just be able to jela masuku, that term that people use, muzati jela masuku pamoto and things like that. So don't you think that these people should be held to account and say, look, you were given an elective position to come and represent the players, but the feedback that we're getting from the players is 1, 2, 3, 4. So you, Mr. Otema, you are not doing your job to communicate with the players.
Yes.
How
is the federation looking at that?
100%. And
okay,
maybe just my initial thought, my initial comment was that yesterday we had this conversation, an informal conversation, and my thoughts were in the form of a challenge to say, the constitution assumed that all these members will be active, okay, the ones that I've alluded to. But when we look at the state of basketball in Zambia today, I would say we only have 2 active associations, maybe just 2, all right? So then it defeats the whole purpose of limiting the membership of attend the federation to only those specified bodies, because we don't get anyone from wheelchair basketball attending our AGMs. Okay, we do get, of course, coaches, we do get referees, but these other representatives who could then form the majority of attendance in the AGM are not active and hence are not available for the AGM. So if we are well-meaning, we may want to start thinking about proposing motions, and that's why I said you hang me for saying this, to say, can we then have a motion to allow membership to the AGM to extend to these other bodies, because there isn't any voice coming from these other parties. And obviously Otema is well versed with these constitutional things, but he would yeah. So that's my comment. Yeah.
Okay, Otema, you briefly,
okay,
you wanted to weigh in on this one. The floor is yours, sir. Yeah. Oh, okay. Try to be as brief as possible.
I wanted to weigh in on this. I'll try to be as brief as possible. As far back as maybe 2012, this problem has persisted. When we changed from ZBA to ZBF, we changed structures without changing the constitution. So the process to change ZBA to ZBF initially was illegal. against our own constitution, because the process was very clear, but it was abrogated. However, that is water under the bridge. But the fact that there are teething problems is as a result of people having vested interest in position rather than achieving a unified goal. And then, this is the big elephant in the room. There have been, and they still continue to be, affiliations around personalities in basketball. And I think this is why maybe if there were amendments, maybe the tenure of office must actually even be reduced so that we avoid the mentality of no change but change. In short, the feeling that is persisting out there is there was very little change in the character of ZBF more than the structure. In short, the same people are doing the same things, when the structure of ZBA should have accepted that it's transforming, and it wasn't, and it isn't. But that is a feeling. The fact of the matter is there is a new constitution that speaks to the changes that ZBF aspires to get to. I have always argued this one view, beyond the rhetoric of Copperbelt and basically Lusaka. When do we have an open discussion about basketball growing in other parts of the country? And this question is a very cardinal one, because even when we strategize, our strategic plan should speak to those areas where we should be going. The emphasis or the focus must go outward more than inward. So I don't know if I've spoken more clearly, because it's brief. I would have given specific examples in the past, because we don't really, we are not supposed to be attempting very new things. We are supposed to be refining processes that have not done well and do better. But there has to be institutional memory. I think part of the challenge that Mr. Balamani and all other executive members sometimes even admit to is there is no transfer of previous successes or failures to other administrations. It's as if once one administration leaves, they leave with everything and expect the other persons to succeed. It's like there is no support for the new administration. Let me be one of the very few persons on this platform that is indicating that I am very ready to speak about processes that we could have started that can help this executive. And I repeat.
Okay, definitely we will give you an opportunity later on, or as we proceed, Mr. Otema, just to come through and be able to furnish with that, to furnish us with that knowledge. Obviously, gentlemen, you've got so many things to do tomorrow, so I don't intend to keep you longer than necessary on this platform. But again, Mr. Tony, people seem to love you so much in this basketball world, eh? I've got another name withheld. Okay, this time around, not on my WhatsApp, but on my actual text message. So this one has my number, sir. And they are saying, can you ask why the national team doesn't have equipment, transport money for coaches, players, and what was the amount in get takings at NASDAQ for the national championship? Okay, so you can couple that with, do coaches have to travel to pick talent from all provinces, or it is still Lusaka and CB representing the nation? So maybe you can weigh in on those three things, I believe.
Okay, so there's some technical questions asked there. I'm not sure if I'm in the right position to give that position on the technical side. Amount of get takings, is this a forum to discuss? I know it's not a secret, but I think it will be availed to all stakeholders in the forthcoming AGM. And so that.
Okay. So when you say stakeholders, When you say stakeholders, so what you basically are saying is, if I'm a player for Bulldogs, who can I ask about the gate taking so that the players that are watching this know right now who to go and ask after the AGM?
It's a very simple equation. You simply tell your club chair to write to your general secretary, and the general secretary will get the information and relay it on to you.
Do they have to write, or during the AGM it will be given publicly, and then from there they can just communicate to their various constituencies?
Yes, so at the time of the AGM, that will be a public document. That
Okay.
is what I meant. But obviously,
Mhm.
for any concerns that they may wish to ask the federation, that is the channel that a club will write to their general secretary, provincial general secretary. The provincial general secretary would then write to the federation general secretary, who would then respond to them.
Okay, so I think you've tackled the issue of the gate takings, the issue of the money for the coaches, transport for players, water, and all these under 18 trials and everything going on. Is this something that you can weigh in on?
Okay, so the topic around the under 18 team that's currently conducting trials and training sessions is something that is on the plate in terms of what we are discussing, how we can support that team. I wouldn't want to comment on that, and probably the person will be upset with me for choosing not to. But I feel the rightful people in that forum, that is the team management of the under 18, are well aware and well informed of what is going on. I do understand they are receiving some support, whether it's from the federation or not, but there is some support that has come through the office of the national technical coordinator. So it's not entirely true that they are not getting any support. That I wouldn't say, but
Okay.
it is
Okay.
what it is. We could do better there. So that would be my comment around that.
Okay, so as we get to the close of our program, earlier on you mentioned something that I'd like to draw you back on. You said predominantly the active PBAs is Copper Belt, CBA, and MBA. I've had interactions with a few individuals from Eastern Province, and for me, it looks like there's some potential from Eastern Province to be able to grow them. Obviously, it will take time, but there is some potential for Eastern Province to be able to become actively engaged as CBA and MBA. So I'd like to find out from you, as a person that is part of the leadership that is looking at, or that is the umbrella to all these PBAs. What is it that you are doing to be able to create that inclusive environment for them to be able to be co-opted and become active members? And Southern Province as well, there's a whole lot happening over there. I see a lot of pictures of clinics, pictures of all these activities going on over there, teams going to Zimbabwe to play. What is it that you are doing as part of the leadership to be able to bring all these guys on board so that you can strengthen this umbrella called ZBF?
Thanks. So one of the things that I always tell guys when we have this discussion about these state of affairs with the provinces is that for us to begin to help the provincial associations, we need to be honest, first of all, around the status of basketball in those particular areas. And sometimes we try to play a blind eye or a deaf ear towards what is going on in a province X, province Y. That hasn't helped. Okay. So one of the things that we've done, if you've noticed in the recent past, all developmental activities that the Zambia Basketball Federation has carried out have not taken place in Midlands. They have all been stretched to these other associations. And that is for a fact. That is what's happened on the ground. If anyone in Midlands can point to, did we have a clinic from ZBF last year? It may only be because it was a sponsored clinic and the person who was coming to conduct it needed a central venue. Otherwise, anything that we've been driving, even when we receive funds from FIBA, we are channeling these programs outside um, the Midlands and Copperbelt as well, just to catch up with those. So we are trying to encourage growth. I think anything that's happening in Eastern Province has got our support. We've also engaged the provincial heads into one forum where we speak and where we communicate. We have regular meetings with these guys and just to check in on what's happening. But the truth of the matter is their environments may not be as mature as these other environments are. And that is one brutal truth we need to be honest about. And every time I speak like that, I seem to be called to say I'm looking down on other people. But all I'm trying to say is when we are honest about a condition, we can then get the best help that's needed to develop. Because if you talk of developing basketball in Province X, to what extent can you grow it? That is my biggest question. Are you looking at it matching up to Midlands or matching up to Copperbelt or exceeding Midlands? How far can you push? How far can you bleed water from a rock? We need to understand those dynamics. And as Zambians, I don't know if it's a Zambian problem, we do not like to hear the truth at times. And so that also stifles development because we want people who are going to tell us things that may not even come to fruition. And for me, I try and be as blunt as I can. Unfortunately, I am not in these technical meetings, and I do give an ear and a voice where I can, but largely it is the state of basketball in Zambia that we need to be honest and see how we can draw the best out of what we have. And so that's where I would leave it there.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have lost Mr. Otema again due to network, but I was hoping that as we get to wrap up, he would obviously come through. And one of the things that obviously Ephraim, who's been very active this evening, again raises that has caught my attention is the issue of access to information. And this is something that Tony, I really, really would love personally to see that the association works on, especially going forward. I know that there's a constitution that prescribes a certain procedure. Okay, Mr. Otema is back, but this will be your last question, Tony. Factor it in your closing remarks before I hand over the floor to Mr. Otema. The issue of access to information is very, very important, you know, for people, especially, I'm going to talk about information. We're not talking about information about there will be games over the weekend, but we need information such as we saw a record crowd at NASDAQ, how much money was raised. We need to know that information. These are public offices. So perhaps what we would love to see and maybe get a commitment from you this year, are we likely to see possible revisions of perhaps the Constitution to facilitate for access to information, something very, very important, such that we will not need to start writing letters to Yvonne, to Gwen, to Milken, to whoever, just to be able to know how much money was raised to get takings. Is this something that, Tony, we are likely to see ZBF perhaps address so that we could have ease flow of information? But before you answer that, Tony, as you think over it, please prepare it and attach it to your closing remarks. Mr. Otema, unfortunately, we lost you there for a bit. But like I said, I don't want to keep you guys very late. So I'll just go straight to your closing remarks. What is it that you would leave us with this evening?
Okay. I believe that we have well-meaning individuals that are in leadership and they need the support from everybody. It's a two-way street, so even the leadership should be able to be open to these types of interaction. I think this is one in many attempts, and I think I have to commend Tony for having been very candid and open, and this is the sort of leadership that we have been looking for, and I would only encourage him to do better. from the basketball family, I think it is easy to pass judgment or comments from the terraces until you get in the trenches where the actual action is happening. I would encourage, especially the women folk, to take up these leadership positions and also be part of the decision-making processes for basketball. For the players, I think it's clear that we have the passion, but do we have the discipline? With those, well, there should have been a few words. Those are my parting words.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Antema. So, Tony, the floor is yours for your closing remarks.
Thanks. This really has been insightful, and I think I like the comments coming. So, a few closing remarks. Basketball is a product, and we're only as good as the product that we have. So, a product is comprised of, just like OT has mentioned, players, coaches, administrators. Everyone has their role to play, and only when we work together, trust me, can we then get the right product out. With regards to publishing of guest takings, I would actually challenge people. Why is it that everyone asks about get takings? Is it because that's the only money they see? I mean, the ZBF gets grants from National Olympic Committee. ZBF gets grants from FIBA. And sometimes they do get money from National Sports Council. So let's not, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. People need to account for it. So I know, because national championship is what we see people paying at the door, guys harassing you, haven't paid. And so I've paid my 50 kwacha, I want to see a financial report and so forth. Rest assured, we some of us have families to protect, careers to protect. We will not misuse your money for personal gain or what it is, but we will provide a report as required. The AGM is in 2 weeks' time, and once we do share those reports with the general secretaries, there is no limit to where they can take that information, because it then becomes a public document. Remember, the AGM has to be attended by a representative of the National Sports Council through the Ministry of Sport. And if we are not doing that, National Sports Council will be the first to actually, impeach this executive. We've seen what has happened to tennis in the last months. Tennis executive was impeached from internal wrangles. I don't know what those were, but there is an active eye. And that is why that person sits throughout the entire AGM, records what happens, and then provides a report to Sports Council that basketball is functioning. If there are red flags, they may or may not flock it, but we are accountable to you as your leaders. That I can assure you. We may do things that may seem unpleasing to the naked eye, but rest assured we have the interest of advancing the game of basketball ahead. And so let's have constructive discussions. Let's have constructive criticism. As Otema said, don't personalize it. We are not there yet. We are not a FIFA yet. We are not a FIBA yet. But we can take the slow steps that we need to form the right product that we can sell to the world. And when I say the right product, that is why, as players, are we the right players that can market this country? As coaches, as referees, as officials, as team managers, are we carrying that right persona per se? If we have those kind of characters within the sport, then we'll start to advance the game. Just think of it, in the next 2026, you will be having an elected AGM, which means you will be electing new leaders into these positions that we hold. Look around you. do you see the characters that can come and enhance? Of course, we work together and see how we can pass on knowledge that we already have, experiences that we already have, and make your lives easier, and you advance the game. You see, I'm happy to get to that elective AGM and devote more time to my other causes in life. But until that time, I'll do my best to see what we can do for the game of basketball.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mulemwa Balamani and Mr. Otema Musuka, for joining me this evening to have an important conversation for developing the game of basketball. And I love what the gentlemen have said, especially with regards the issue of, developing or uplifting the standards of sport in this country. Mr. Otema, obviously, as I indicated, earlier on, I was chatting with somebody. I said, look, I'm going to be having Otema on the show this evening. And they were asking, who is this Otema? I said, okay, you're new to the game of basketball. Go and ask people. They'll tell you who this Otema is. And, from the feedback I'm getting, obviously, they've really enjoyed and appreciate, the wealth of knowledge that you have for the game. So we will keep coming to you to be able to just come, interact with us, educate, and reason with us in terms of improving and developing the game of basketball. So congratulations, and we salute you, Mr. Otema, for coming through. And to borrow your words, Mr. Otema, as I go to Mr. Tony, is one of the things that I appreciate about the ZBF leadership is the fact that, whenever I have made calls for them to come through, at least my calls have not fallen on deaf ears. And this is something that I'll be very frank with you, I'm eternally grateful for, for you guys in that executive, because each time I say, please, I need you, you always create time out of your busy schedule to come through and not only interact with me, but with the general populace within the game of basketball. So, Mr. Tony, thank you very much for putting yourself in the crossfire and being able to take those questions, from the anonymous individuals that want to be very candid, with you, and just being able to take the punch as a leader and show people that you are not only there to be a snob or to be a person who's so prideful and, haughty that you can't listen to what people are saying, but for being humble enough, to take the criticism and take the opportunity to also educate when necessary and provide some clarifications where necessary. This is something that I don't take lightly. I told the GS last week the same thing, that thank you very much for coming through, what you're demonstrating, among other things that we may feel you're not doing right. This, I can tell you, coming to this platform, I believe is among the things that you're doing correctly, not only for yourselves, but for the growth and the development of the Zambian basketball at large. So once again, this evening, I was hosting Mr. Otema Musuka and, of course, Tony Mulemwa Balamani, who is a very good dear friend of mine and, plays a very central key within the basketball governance in this country. And that we're here to interact with us this evening. And all of you that were active in our comment section, thank you very much for joining us. Ephraim Mutondo, thank you very much for being very active. Nikki, thank you very much for always showing up and making sure that you utilize this platform to enhance conversation within or conversation about the game of basketball. Iliam Denge, and the rest of the people that I may not mention here, but thank you, all of you, just for coming through, Keke Mwanza, everybody else, thank you very much for just coming through and making this show a success as it is, and of course, a growing success, I must mention. And remember, we do it all for the sake of growing the game of basketball. From me, Wenson Mavoro, it is good night, and I am out.